Hi there, this is Solitary Ronan from Solitary Ronan Films, and welcome to another episode of Double Take. Today I'm going to talk about Robert Bresson and two of his crime films, Pickpocket from 1959 and L'Argent from 1983, his final film. Both have had recent Blu-ray releases by BFI. Long overdue. So Bresson is one of those directors that I guess can seem intimidating as far as his style or lack of style, which in itself is a style. But these are two of his more accessible films. It's strange, but watching or doing a Dardenne season last year and then watching Bresson obviously is a huge influence. The editing style of Bresson, you can see the influence in Catano's editing style, especially when it comes to violence and actually showing violence in the cut rather than on screen. Because with Bresson, a lot happens off screen, and it's what he doesn't show that is perhaps sometimes more important than what he does show. Bresson films are economic. During his career, he wanted to get rid of all artifice, use of music, for example. Some of his films have pieces of score, but they're generally specific pieces of music. L'Argent, for example, has no score. Pickpocket has a couple of classical pieces. And obviously the acting style, which again isn't a style, even though it's a style, he used non-professional actors, which again the Dardennes did a bit of. He would do lots of takes, so the actors would almost forget, or just due to tiredness lose all kind of mannerism or affectation, so they would have this flat delivery, so it's not a performance. But somehow by doing that, Bresson's films at their best have a truth and an honesty, because as we know, acting, it is a performance, and we talk about how great an actor's performance was, whereas in Bresson films it's not performance. Again, it's an aspect of getting to the truth, because as we know, actors off screen, when they're on chat shows or when they're being interviewed, they're still acting, really. And when they're on chat shows telling anecdotes, they're still acting because they can't switch it off. And Bresson wanted none of that. So Pickpocket, which has always been my favourite Bresson, and Paul Schrader's favourite Bresson, if you watch American Gigolo and Light Sleeper and First Reformed and The Card Counter, you'll know it's Paul Schrader's favourite. It's one of the classic One Man and His Room films about an amateur pickpocket who's not very good, learns the ropes, has brushes with the law, believes in God for 3 minutes. Wears an ill-fitting suit, which is kind of interesting as he's trying to figure out his own skin, his own reason for existence, again, Bresson was very into hands and what hands can do. So there's lots of close-ups of hands, especially in Pickpocket, but there's lots of close-ups of hands in Larjon and many of his other films, or hoofs in the case of Ohazard Balthazar, his donkey picture. But again, there's a lot in eyes as well. There's lots of people walking through doors, opening doors, closing doors. And again, that just puts you into a certain rhythm. You are drawn to the character in Pickpocket as he's trying to figure something out. You're not quite sure what he's actually trying to figure out, but he's trying to figure something out. And his meaning of existence, it's almost not about the end result, it's not about the thrill, it's almost about the mechanism of pickpocketing rather than the exhilaration, rather than the end result of having a skirting board full of money and watches. Because again, this is low level stuff. This is not, huge diamond heists, because again, that would be completely un-Bressonian. But it's just hypnotic. Like I say, you get into a rhythm, and it's just absolutely wonderful, and it does have one of the most moving endings. As we see his relationship with a neighbour who kind of looks in on his sick mother, and that relationship, which at first seems like one thing, in the end it has a really moving and wonderful ending. So perhaps Pickpocket, you could argue, is his most engaging film, but it's absolutely wonderful. And then we have Larjon, which, as I say, was his last film. You can make the argument this is the bleakest Bresson film, but again, most of his films don't have happy endings, because obviously happy endings are a conceit, and they are not the truth, because after all, happiness itself is merely a performance. For all you happy people out there, you're just pretending. It's a performance. This has another wonderful rhythm. This is like a descent into hell. A couple of schoolboys, middle class schoolboys, have a forged banknote which they pass off. This is, you can tell it's a French film because the first item they want to pass off this counterfeit money is a picture frame. It's perhaps not the first item you would think as a schoolboy to use to get counterfeit money, but never mind. And then certain people make decisions along the duration of the film, and those decisions have consequences to other people. So the whole, we're a community and look after each other is complete nonsense, as we know, because people generally just look after themselves. So the owners of this camera shop that they bought the frame in, they realise it's fake, and then they pass it on to a worker who is doing a delivery for them, and then the worker tries to spend the money in a restaurant, and then the restaurant owner gets the police because he accuses them of trying to pass counterfeit money, and the police are called. The guy says, well, this is the shop and they passed it to me, and of course the boss, and I think is his wife, it might not actually be his wife, but the woman who runs the shop and the assistant, they all pretty much lie and say they've never seen the guy before, So the guy he has to pay damages, but he loses his job, and that leads to more consequences. He gets another job, which is illegal in itself, and then that ends up with him having even more bad consequences, and he ends up in prison. The shop assistant, he has a wonderful story himself. He's changing the prices on items in the shop and pocketing the difference. He gets fired, and then he becomes this Robin Hood criminal mastermind character who we do see an early ATM machine that they try and this character Lucien, the shop assistant, he tries to get money from that as well, which he does, and he has this philosophical attitude towards what he's doing, and he should break rules, and so he has his own little journey, which is kind of fascinating as well as this poor guy that by consequences, now he makes choices as well which turn out to be the wrong choices, but again it's this idea that the universe is just going to screw you over. People's decisions that you think don't affect you, there will be consequences for you, and yes, you make your own choices which just make it worse, but it's not a universe of reciprocity and everything works out and everything happens for a reason and all of that stuff. This is the universe doesn't care, and the universe is out to get you. The guy and Lucien meet up in prison, and that takes another turn as well. And then this is Bresson taking it to the nth degree as the film ends, in a pretty brutal way, but again with Bresson you don't actually see everything. So I mean, the idea of Bresson from the outside might be, oh, nothing much happens, people come in and out of rooms and say, flatly delivered lines. But I mean, Largeon has a bank robbery that's very economically shot. It has a brawl in a restaurant, which is just pretty much the show of a shove and a hand and a table. It has a car chase, a Bresson film with a car chase. It has deaths off screen mostly. It has domestic violence off screen, just shown in a spilled cup of coffee. It almost has a prison riot, but again shot as economically as possible. So there's a lot going on in Largeon. This isn't, one of those quiet art house films that nothing happens. A lot happens in its 84 minutes. And again, Bresson has that thing where sometimes he leaves a shot longer than you naturally would leave it, but it's always with a purpose. And then there's other shots that are just such quick cutting, and again especially with the violence, which does remind you a lot of Takeshi Kitano's editing, as I mentioned before. So Kitano films a lot of the time you think are a lot more violent than they actually are, because the violence is contained in that cut, and it's the same in Largeon. An old woman gets slapped, but you think you've seen it, but you haven't seen it. The deaths that happen seem a lot more brutal than they're actually shown. There is a wonderful shot of a light on a blood-soaked wall that quickly goes out. The bulb bursts, which I always love, which does remind me a little bit of a David Lynch moment. So, I mean, L'Argent is action-packed. Again, for people who think Bresson is very stiff and stately and quiet. L'Argent's got a lot going on. Again, somebody in the extras does say that if it was directed by somebody else, it would be, over 2 hours long and have these massive set pieces. But again, Bresson wanted to boil everything down to its natural essence, to its diamond point of clarity and truth. And Pickpocket and L'Argent are, for me, again, a lot of them I need to rewatch, but Pickpocket and L'Argent to me are really prime examples of Bresson at his best. And again, these two BFIs, they also released The Trial of Joan of Arc from 1962, which again is based on the real trial and based on literally just the notes from the trial. So again, very spare, short, but again, you get into the rhythm of it and it becomes something different than what you would expect. But as I say, these two BFIs are stacked. This one, Pickpocket, has a Robert Bresson Q&A from 1971, which is audio only, which is 47 minutes. This has an 11-minute interview with Paul Schrader from 2022, where he talks about Pickpocket being an influence. No surprise there. And then we have a 52-minute piece from 2003, The Models of Pickpocket, which is about the actors or models that Bresson used. There's some archive shorts about pickpocketing, and there's a 1950 41-minute documentary about prisons, and obviously there's a booklet. And in L'Argent even, there's a 22-minute discussion between Jeff Andrew, the BFI, Jonathan Hurrigan, and Nasreen Mooney Kabir, who both worked with Bresson in his later films, from the BFI, which is fascinating. First and last, there's a 9-minute piece from 2022 by Jonathan Hurrigan, looking at or comparing his first feature, Les Anges de Pêche, with L'Argent. There's a really good Michael Brook video essay on the root of all evil from 2022, which is 19 minutes, about L'Argent, which is absolutely fantastic. There's a 27-minute audio introduction by Jonathan Hurrigan from 2007, which is excellent. And then there's a 1970 22-minute short film, Value for Money, starring Quentin Crisp, about the connections between money and religion. And there's a nice booklet. So I would highly recommend the 3 BFI Bresson Blu-rays. I don't know whether they plan to release any more. No doubt there's probably rights issues. But again, I am not a Bresson expert. There's far better resources and people on YouTube that can talk about Bresson a lot more than I can. But these two Bresson films are really wonderful. For me, they're both 5-star films, and L'Argent has to rank as one of the best last films that a director has ever made. And again, the 2 BFI releases are really excellent. So thanks very much for watching this episode of Double Take. Please leave comments below what you think of these 2 Bresson films, and hopefully join me again for more videos. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.